This episode of Tipping Pitches that you're listening to right now is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it is the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place.
Anchor is really easy to use. It lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone, your computer, your typewriter, wherever you're recording your podcast. So no matter what your setup looks like, you can start creating today.
Then you can distribute your podcast to the most popular listening platforms, including Spotify, with a single tap. Anchor is the only place you can publish video podcasts to Spotify.
With Anchor, not only is it easy to make and distribute your podcasts, but you can also earn money from your podcasts in a variety of ways, including ads and things like podcast subscriptions.
And best of all, Anchor is totally free to use. So if Anchor sounds good to you, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, do you have any updates for the listeners on your quest to become Alex Rodriguez's protege?
You know, so I looked into this the other day because I was curious to see if I could find what you were talking about, his professional development seminars, or whatever they are. And I was having trouble actually tracking anything down.
That's because I just made them up.
Are you serious?
Well, I didn't actually make them up out of thin air. It was like something that I kind of thought that he did. You know, that was 65% sure that this was a service that he offered.
Right. Well, he does do speaking engagements.
Okay.
So I think that we could reach out and book him with some of that sweet, sweet Patreon money for our own personal professional development seminar.
Well, that's a question. Would he do a speaking engagement as a podcast appearance for everyone in the world to hear? Or is this sort of like a closed door event like Hillary Clinton at Goldman Sachs?
That's exactly what it's like.
I think it is. He's not just going to give away the goods on wax.
You're right.
The reason that I ask is because Alex Rodriguez's finances are in the news once more. And I was hoping that maybe you had become his protege and you could sort of shed light on this story for us.
Unfortunately, he keeps me away from the numbers. I don't really get to see that side of things. So when it all goes belly up, I'm gonna be finding out when you do. I'm gonna be on Indeed.com. Like, wow,
sure,
it's how quickly things change.
Well, he didn't keep Josh Kosman of the New York Post away from the numbers. According to Josh Kosman of the New York Post, Alex Rodriguez only paid for 7% of the first 20% that he and Mark Lohr invested in the Minnesota Timberwolves. The second 20% is due in September, and our man A-Rod is again short on liquid money, this reporting says. He's not liquid enough. He's making mistake number one, Alex.
Gotta have that cash on hand, cash under the mattress.
Deal flow.
Should we be concerned about him?
I don't know. So here's why I wanted to talk about this. Hasn't he been through enough?
Mm-hmm.
Him and J-Lo break up. And that's part of this, is the breakup and him trying to maneuver his assets along with Jennifer Lopez is making him slightly less liquid. So he already lost out on the New York Mets, his favorite team growing up because of Keith Hernandez. He is about to be passed by Albert Pujols. He's 4 home runs shy of 700. He's posting sweaty workout videos 3 times a day. Hasn't this man been through enough? Just let him have the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is funny money anyway.
Give it to him.
Just give him to him.
Right. You can see how much he enjoys it, right? Like, it would make him feel so good.
The smile on his face as he holds this Wilson basketball in this stock photo that appears of him and Mark Lohr holding basketballs every time that there's a story written about the Minnesota Timberwolves. He just looks so happy in a way that we haven't seen him in quite a while.
Do we know the sum that he needs to raise? Like, do we know what that 20% chunk looks like?
It's 20% of 1.5 billion. So like 300 million but he only needs to have half of that. Although he didn't pay half of the first 20%. So I think he has to make up the difference. So I think he's like kind of on the hook for like 450 million right now, which is it's a lot.
That is a lot. He doesn't have that.
According to you, as his, are you speaking in your capacity as his protege?
This is off the record.
Or are you speaking in your capacity as a host of Tipping Pitches podcast?
I've not seen it in his wallet.
So, friend of the show, frequent Tipping Pitches questioner, Becca asked in the Slack, how many at-bats would it take him to come back and reach the 700 home run mark? He's 4 shy. Albert Pujols is right on his tail. Do you think that his quest to come back at this age, after all this time and all these stories and all of his time in the booth at ESPN and his time on the K-Rod cast and his comments in the Derek Jeter documentary and everything that's happened since he retired, sort of unceremoniously in the middle of a baseball season, do you think that that could garner him $450 million to make up this debt?
Him hitting 4 home runs, like could he parlay that into some sort of deal?
I mean, he did sign the best contract in baseball history.
That's true. I think he might struggle to get 450 million out of that.
Yeah.
I think here's the thing. To address Becca's question, I think he could do it.
Oh yeah. Like I think he can still hit dead red. I believe it.
If you gave him a month, I think you'd get there. He had petered off at the end of his Yankees career. He had hit 9.
I like that, petered off. That's a new one. And petered out, like you combine petered out and tapered off. I love it. He petered off
9 home runs
in his final season
games. In 65 games.
Oh my god, that's more than I would have guessed. 9 home runs in 65 games. Like he could DH in the league right now with some of these these hitters that I 20. See.
Yeah, but that is 6 years ago, right? The game has changed. A-Rod himself has changed.
Right.
But again, like you said, we've been seeing him at the gym day in and day out.
He's not putting in that work for nothing.
He's trying to get himself that slow pitch softball contract.
To answer Becca's question, I think he could do it in 400 plate appearances. 1 home run for every 100 plate appearances. Yeah. Do you think that's low or high?
I think that's high. I think he could do it in less. I think he could do it in like 250.
250? Jeez. James McCann could never. Can A-Rod catch? Just wondering. Just one Mets fan wondering aloud.
Aside from catching strays from the New York Post about his liquidity.
Okay, we have an exciting podcast coming up for you. We talked for a long time with Eugene Freedman, who is a mainstay on baseball and labor Twitter for his actual legally backed up opinions. He is a labor lawyer who is a great follow about CBA matters and minor league unionization matters. We focus primarily on the minor league unionization news. We also talked with Allison McCague, who is one of the hosts of A Pot of Their Own, which is a New York Mets podcast, part of the Amazing Avenue SB Nation suite of Mets podcasts. I'm a big fan of that show. We talked to Allison about their Dollars for Dingers drive. It's another great conversation. We're going to answer a couple more listener questions. Maybe we'll talk about the MVP. I don't really know. I don't know if people need to hear more people talking about the MVP. But before we do all of that exciting stuff, I am Bobby Wagner.
I am Alex Baisley.
And you are listening to Tipping Pitches. All right. Thank you to our new patrons from this past week, Emily and Oscar. Alex, we received an important question in the Slack a few weeks ago now at this point, but we haven't answered questions much recently in the last 2 episodes. We've had a lot going on. But this question comes from Dan, who is a big Mets fan, active member of the Slack. Dan asked, how much of a deal breaker is your baseball life? Now, I thought this was a pertinent question for us to answer on this episode since we're recording it about 16 hours after I attended the Mets' worst game of the season, a 7-1 loss to the bottom of the barrel Washington Nationals, a 5-run top of the 9th inning. And I, needless to say, was not in a good mood after that performance. I attended that game with my partner. And so I thought maybe it was a fruitful thing to talk about. How much of a deal breaker is your baseball life? This question spurred more conversation in the Slack than just about anything that has happened in the baseball world outside of minor league unionization. So I turn it to you first. Dan elaborates. If someone won't participate in or appreciate your baseball life, are they less likely to be in your life? Has your dedicated fandom caused a divide in any relationships, romantic or otherwise? Or stopped one from growing further?
Luckily, I've never been in a position where I've had to choose between a person I love and a mid-August A's game against the Rangers. I suppose the question kind of depends on some of those things that Dan included at the end of his question, right? Like, does the person need to actively participate in my baseball fandom? It'd be nice, but is that going to be the deal breaker? No. Does the person actively disparage my baseball fandom? That might be a bit of an issue. But you know, I have things as does my partner that interest one of us more than the other. Like, I do think there's a deal breaker element in there, you know, and I think I would try and kind of lay the groundwork for sussing that out very early on. You know, my first date with my partner was technically a Yankees game.
Is that true? That's so sweet. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was Yankees A's.
I actually probably did know that, and I just forgot it because that was a period of time in my life where I just wasn't remembering that many things.
Dark days. Yeah. But like, that felt like a good omen. You know, if you can float that and the person does not run the other direction, feels like you're in good hands.
The reason I wanted to answer Dan's question is because, honestly, so I agree with what you're saying. There's probably a deal breaker element if the person just completely disregards your love for baseball, because let's face it, baseball is a huge part of our lives, as it is probably a huge part of most of the people listening to this podcast lives. But more likely, my baseball fandom is the deal breaker for the other person. So
right, yeah,
it's not on them. It's most likely on me, which I think is a useful reminder as we head into the late days of the regular season, as we head into a potential Mets playoff run in October. It's a useful reminder for me to speak out loud that I might be breaking some deals with people in my life via my behavior when the Mets make the playoffs. We've never done this podcast when the Mets have been in the playoffs.
Yeah, and let me tell you, that's a time to be around Bobby. You will see a side of him you've never seen before.
Suffice to say, not many people will be seeing that. We will not be doing any live streams during the Mets playoff run in October of Mets games. We can do other games. We can do other games, but I don't think I want to be in front of a computer. I don't think I can stay in front of a computer for that long. Honestly.
No, big pacing energy.
Big pacing energy. We just needed to answer Dan's question because a lot of people were wearing their hearts on their sleeves in the Slack about how much of a deal breaker their personal baseball fandom has been in their lives.
Which I think kind of answers the question itself. The fact that people have such strong opinions about it.
If you're listening to this and you're not in the Slack, or you just happen to not see this, write in, call in. Let us know how much of a deal breaker your baseball fandom is for you.
I know. Have you had any relationships end due to baseball, to your baseball fandom, or lack thereof? I'm really curious. Baseball has to have broken some people's hearts.
That's a good question. Have you chosen not to become friends with a person because of their opinions towards baseball? I think most of the time I just roll my eyes. Whenever I meet someone new and they're like, "Oh, you like baseball?" I'm like, "All right, congratulations.
Yeah,
well, you seem really cool. Thanks." But have you had that experience where you chose not to become friends with someone because of baseball?
I think similarly, I haven't actively not become their friend. I just might not address the issue for fear of getting worked up. I mean, there are people
non-confrontational Alex strikes again.
That's right. There are people with whom I maybe won't talk about baseball extensively because I'm worried about where their opinions might end up.
Yeah.
That's the closest thing where I'm like, it's kind of like, we don't talk about politics at the dinner table. We don't talk about how much Aaron Judge is going to make in the offseason. I don't really want to know if you think he should give the Yankees a hometown discount.
I do find it sort of hard to start conversations with people who find out that I like baseball for the first time. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, you like baseball? And then where do you go from there? Because it strikes me as the most overbearing thing in the entire world for me to try to explain what this podcast is to people who don't know about it. So
right. I'm like, I guess technically, yeah, I like baseball, but here's the jib.
Yeah.
Here's how it really works.
It's more than that. It's more than that. I hate it, but I love it. But I'm critical of it because I love it. It's ruined my life, but it's also made my life what it is. So where do you want to start?
It's a problematic family member, right? You're like, look, yeah. Does he do everything right? Does he always say the right things? No. But I love him anyway. And I'm trying to make him a better person. Exactly.
All right. Well, speaking of baseball improving and trying to make it a better place in person, I guess, if we're talking about it as though it's a human, we're going to go to our conversation with Allison McCague to talk about Dollars for Dingers. Now, if you're listening to this and you don't know about Dollars for Dingers already, we'll get into a little bit in the conversation with Allison, but please make sure to check out the links in the description below or go find Allison on social media and Twitter to see where you can donate for this great fundraiser that's very interactive and cool and a fun way to bring not just Mets fans, but all baseball fans together.
Don't forget to come and pick up your feelings. Don't leave no pieces. You need to hurry and pick up your...
We are now joined by Allison McCague of A Pot of Their Own. Allison, hello. Welcome to Tipping Pitches.
Hi. Thanks for having me, guys.
Allison, you're here to talk about Dollars for Dingers, which is a fundraiser you guys have been doing for how long now?
This is the 4th annual Dollars for Dingers, so since 2019.
Dollars for Dingers, for folks who don't know, who aren't fans of A Pot of Their Own, which is a wonderful podcast that you should listen to if you like the New York Mets or you just like anything in the baseball world. It's a fundraiser that raises money for every Mets home run hit and donates that money to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So we wanted to have you on to talk about that and to talk about how this idea even started and how much it's grown since it started. But of course, we just want to hear... We also want to talk about the Mets because the Mets, we're Mets sickos here now too, even though currently as we record this, our Twitter is a Yankees podcast. But
Tipping Pitches, a Yankees podcast.
It's really painful,
I saw that.
actually.
I was like, what bet did you guys lose?
Yeah, a really embarrassing public bet on the podcast. But tell us about how Dollars for Dingers started.
Sure. So A Pot of Their Own is part of the Amazing Avenue SB Nation site. And we are the podcast as part of that podcast network that's run entirely by women. It's myself and 2 other women who host the show together. And so we kind of, when Amazing Avenue expanded out its podcasting efforts from just having one podcast to having a whole bunch of them, we were sort of the podcast that was the women-led podcast, and we were also the one who talks about social justice issues in baseball. And so obviously a big cause that's been close to our heart for a long time that we've yelled into the void about on our podcast for a long time is domestic violence and the issue that it is in baseball and MLB's inability to deal with it. Not just MLB, obviously, all sports leagues fall short in this regard, but we particularly care about MLB on our podcast. So we felt powerless for a long time. We were like, how much good are we doing just screaming into the Icelandic void about this on our podcast? It's cathartic. It makes us feel better, but is it really making any material difference? We really want to do something more. So that's kind of how Dollars for Dingers came about. It started in the 2019 season and it has grown beyond my wildest imagination, to be something that we look forward to every single year. And it just gets bigger and bigger every year. To date, we've raised over $25,000 for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, between all the years that we've done it. And so it's just been really, really humbling to see the outpouring of support, and every year the number of pledges growing, and people getting the word out. It's been really awesome. And so we're really excited to make this one even bigger this year.
So this culminates also in an event at Citi Field as well, right? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that and the process of this whole kind of drive leading up to that date at Citi Field?
Yeah. So obviously the crux of the fundraiser is, as you guys already said, it's during the month of September. We collect pledges for every Mets home run hit during that month. So you can say like $2 per Mets home run. And we have a spreadsheet where people put their pledges in. And obviously like that raises a ton of funds. But in 2019, we also had an in-person event at McKellar. At the time, it was McKellar at Citi Field. And we had a bunch of awesome prizes donated to us for the fundraiser, including from the Mets themselves, donated memorabilia to us. And that was such a huge success. And we had so much fun that we decided to make that an every year thing. So sometime during the fundraiser, usually towards the end, although this year with the way the Mets schedule is and like when their home games are, it's kind of in the middle a little bit, but we try during the second half of September, we always have this fundraiser, this in-person event. Sadly, in 2020, we could not have an in-person event because of the pandemic. But in 2021, we returned in person, but still, sadly, we could not have it at Citi Field because there was no brewery in that space where McKellar used to be. McKellar closed down during the pandemic, which we were devastated about. So we did have it at Catch in Astoria, and it was still awesome. But it was like hard to get like the foot traffic the way that you get at Citi Field, where there's already like a built-in like huge crux of Mets fans, many of which don't know that this is happening, and we'll just like walk in and be like, oh, hey, prizes, neat. And we'll throw money our way. So we're really excited to be back at Citi Field this year. So the Ebbs has moved into the McKellar space where McKellar used to be. So now it's Ebbs. And we will be having it there at 4:00 in the afternoon on September 17th, which is Saturday. The Mets are playing the Pirates that day. It's the Gary bobblehead for the Gary, Keith, and Ron three-headed bobblehead, the three-part bobblehead. It's the Gary Cohen one. So we hope that there will be a very big crowd for that already without us having to entice additional people to come. But we really, really hope to see as many people there as possible. We will have so many awesome prizes, including signed memorabilia from the Mets. We cannot yet reveal which players, but in the past we've gotten DeGrom signed baseballs, Nimmo signed bat. So like there will be cool stuff. We also have t-shirts from various, we have Breaking Tea gift cards for those of you who know Breaking Tea, and they're working with athlete logos now. So you could get yourself a nice neon tee from that gift card. Ebbs themselves will be donating a prize pack of beer and swag. And there will be food specials and beer specials, 15% off at Ebbs for anyone who is coming for our fundraiser. So it should be a really good time, and it should raise a lot of additional money for the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
Judging by the crowd and the promptness of the crowd during the Ron Darling bobblehead game, which Alex and I attended just a couple weeks ago, there will be no shortage of Mets fans there early with with some time to spare for that baseball game. It's quite intense, the desire for those bobbleheads. So hopefully you can.
I will say that this is like, I hate to reveal this to such a big audience. I want to like keep this secret close hold so that only my friends and I know about it. But I'm going to do it because I think it'll help our fundraiser a lot. I will say that the right field gate, which is the closest gate to where Ebbs is on Seaver Way in the old McKellar space, that is the best place to go get your bobbleheads where there's no line.
Wow, you heard it here first.
Oh my God.
You heard it live reveal on Tipping Pitches.
The
true
right
Mets fans know.
The rotunda is always a mess because obviously it's the main entrance to get in. So people are gathered around the home run apple, the Seaver statue, all that. Huge crowds, and it's also right where the 7 train gets off, so all the people from the subway are going straight to the rotunda. But if you go around, and the left field gate is like right next to the parking lot, so all the people who've driven are going to the left field gate. The right field gate is kind of tucked behind. You have to like walk all the way around the stadium, so not a lot of people go there. So if you want to get a bobblehead and you don't want to wait in as long of a line, it's right next to Ebbs, so you can hit up our event at 4, go right into the right field gate and get a bobblehead.
Wow.
An amazing sales pitch. And it's just an amazing sales pitch.
Yeah, in like insider trading here on Tipping
Pitches. I know. I hate to reveal my inside secrets, but it's
I love
worth
how you
it.
said to such a large audience, like we're broadcasting live to millions right now, not just
to millions of Mets fans.
a couple of thousand of the most passionate people about baseball and labor on planet Earth.
First of all, I think it's really awesome that a lot of local organizations have gotten on board with this. I think it's really cool that you've been able to rally support around this cause. And I think it's really cool and also interesting that the Mets have decided to participate in this as well, right? The Mets obviously being one of the 30 Major League Baseball teams.
Right.
Famously.
Sometimes not really.
Right. It depends on the year.
Sometimes by name only.
But that strikes me as really kind of interesting, given that a lot of times the teams are the ones who are the problems, right? When it comes to dealing with issues surrounding domestic violence as it pertains to players and that sort of thing. What was your kind of guys' reaction when that the prospect of that sort of partnership first bubbled up? Was there any like, no, absolutely not? I mean, I can't imagine, like, you can't look for a better partner than that. But I'm curious how you guys felt about that.
Right. And the Mets are not innocent of this. Like, they brought back Jose Reyes after they knew that he was an abuser. And that was kind of one of the biggest like things that we talked about on our podcast that sort of led to this. That was like a huge like fire in our belly driver, was how upset we were at the Mets for bringing back Jose Reyes, knowing that he was an abuser.
And it was something that lasted so long. Like, it was right in front of everyone's face for so long. And it was just a mistake from the very beginning.
Yep. And, and they put him out there right next to David Wright on David Wright's last game. He is, in fact, coming to Old Timers Day. So it's not like it's not like they remain. It's not like the new regime has completely turned over a new leaf in this regard. So, it was a struggle. But I think that, with the new regime, the Mets are making a lot of progress, obviously, with Jared Porter and that whole mess. I think they've since taken seriously the bad reputation that they have when it comes to sexism and bad relations with women in their workplace. We recently had Elizabeth Benn on our podcast not too long ago. And she talked a lot about how they're really working to change the culture. And she's a big part of that in their front office. So I like to think that we can be a part of that change ourselves, and them sort of like associating themselves with this fundraiser and this cause. Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's what makes it so hard to talk about these things sometimes is that none of these organizations in Major League Baseball, certainly as a whole, are like not really monoliths. Like there can be like 95% of the organization trying to do the right thing, and then the 5% of people who have the ability to sign Jose Reyes and bring him back are undercutting a lot of the great work that the rest of the organization is doing. And so, it's I think encouraging to see the willing participation in something that you guys are organizing and trying to do for good. We were talking before the podcast started about the creative donations that people have decided to make. Do you have any favorite ones? So, of course, you can donate a dollar amount of your choosing per home run for September, but you can also donate for more obscure occurrences within the world of the New York Mets. Do you have any of some favorites or examples for people if they want to get more creative with it?
Oh my goodness. There have been so many already. I really love all the people that are doing hit by pitches, which is like a thing that's, I think, new this year.
It's kind of like the theme of the year.
Yeah. Like, I don't think that was like an extra donation in any past year. Like they would do, like there are typical ones like DeGrom strikeouts is a big one and things like that. And people will choose specific players. This year, I would say that the most popular specific player dinger choices are Daniel Vogelbach and Mark Canha.
Wow.
Lots of people are donating extra money for Vogelbach dingers and Canha dingers.
A real representative sample of the pot of their own fan base, I think.
I was going to say, I think so. And it's kind of like for two different reasons, those two guys, right? I feel like Mark Canha is the most like in the spirit of the podcast. It's like the people who listen to the podcast are most likely like Mark Canha is probably one of their favorite players. Whereas Daniel Vogelbach, it's just like, we want to see the beefy boy hit dingers.
There's someone on here who's donating $2.70, a penny per pound for each Daniel Vogelbach home run.
So like, dope.
Wow.
That is our lovely podcast producer, Brian Salvatore. And it's great. I love seeing the creativity that people bring. Linda Surovich, fellow co-host, is donating for every Edwin Diaz narco and more money when Timmy Trumpet shows up live, which is happening. It's not happening during September. So we had like a very hearty internal debate about whether that counts.
Whether it should be allowed.
And we decided that it counts half. So she is donating extra because Timmy Trumpet is coming, but it's not during September, technically during the fundraiser. But this year, another new thing that I love to see that hasn't been present on past donations is extra for playoff related things. Like Mets winning the NL East, Mets winning the World Series, how far they advance in the playoffs, how many dingers they hit in the playoffs, all those things, which are technically after September, but I will certainly allow it because it is, that is something that hasn't really happened in the past. A couple of times we had, folks like throw in like $100 if the Mets win the World Series because, it is 2021 Mets and we know by September that they're not winning the World Series. But this year, those donations are more numerous and they are serious because it might happen.
Yeah, no, lots in here about Braves losses as well, which I appreciate.
Someone donated for if the Mets beat Spencer Strider in the final series of the year.
I was just going to say, if it weren't so much work for you, a really good donation would be like every time the Mets get a hit that's under 80 miles per hour exit velocity because of how upset the Braves fans have been about their soft contact hits.
Every time a Braves fan tweets screenshots of baseball savant pages of the New York Mets exit velocities.
Literally, yes, that would be doubly satisfying. The
very lucky New York Mets.
Well, I hope that our listeners will go check it out. Dollars for Dingers. If you live in New York, I hope, and you are able to get out to the 9/17 game. I'm sure it'll be really, really fun. Allison, is there anything else that you want people to know about this, where they can find it most easily? We'll, of course, link everything in the description for people to click straight to from their podcast app. But if they are driving right now and want to get back to it later, what's the best way to find it?
Yeah, so it's currently the link to our spreadsheet is currently the pinned tweet on the A Pod of Their Own Twitter account. So if you go to @apodoftheirown and you go to our pinned tweet, that is where you can find a link to the spreadsheet. But if you are not like a person who is on Twitter, which God bless you, log off forever. I wish I could. If you're not really a person who's on Twitter or like not wanting to find it that way, and you want to make a pledge and you like aren't familiar with like Google spreadsheets or aren't comfortable using it, you can always email us aa.apodoftheirown@gmail.com. If you email us your pledge, I can put it in the spreadsheet for you.
That's awesome. Before we let you go, I'm curious, because this is a really awesome project and very easily replicable. Have you ever had conversations with, I guess, other fans from other fan bases or anything who might be interested in kind of doing the same thing? Because again, like you said, it's a spreadsheet that, you can, it's a lot of work to put together, but it doesn't require any special infrastructure or anything like that to set up.
Any enterprising person with a reasonable amount of time can replicate this spreadsheet pretty easily. We have in the past, I believe it was the first year we did the fundraiser, actually, we partnered with Cup of Cubby Blue, which is the Bleed Cubby Blue podcast also run by women, Sarah Sanchez. Shout out to Sarah. She's awesome. So Cubs fans have been huge for us. We partnered with them the very first year and we sort of had dueling spreadsheets where like the Cubs fans were donating in favor of Cup of Cubby Blue and we were dueling because we were seeing which team was going to hit more home runs in September. That year, the Mets won handily just because, the 2019 Mets did not make the playoffs, but the 2019 Mets hit a ton of dingers, more so than that was the biggest dinger year as far as like the dollar amount. We've raised more money as time has gone on because more people have found out about it, which is great. So we've got more pledges. But as far as like the most home runs hit during the month of September, 2019 Mets, the OG, still king, still king. But we'll see if the 2022 Mets can beat them out. Who knows? Part of that is that Pete Alonso was like breaking the rookie home run record that year.
Yeah. So. Thank you, Rob, for keeping the juice ball around when
I was going to say
$2019 for dingers was going.
September,
he's got like boxes and boxes of them. Like the juice balls are in a warehouse somewhere. Can we maybe just like get access to that just for charity?
Just for a good cause. More dingers, please. Juice those balls right back on up.
Allison McCague, thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
You keep running for another place to find that saving grace.
Okay, thank you to Allison. Like I said, links in the description where you can go find out more, sign up, donate, all that good stuff. We're going to go to our conversation with Eugene Freedman in just a minute, but I wanted to talk with you first, Alex. What's up? Where's your head at on unionizing the minor leagues? How are you feeling? It's we're recording this a week since we found the news out. I guess there's a possibility that the exact same thing happens to us that happened last Sunday night, where we find out some huge fucking news after we have the entire podcast edited and scheduled. But other than that possibility, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good now that the dust has settled a little bit and I've been able to get my thoughts in order. I think talking with you last week really helped me kind of collect my thoughts, and I really appreciated our conversation with Eugene that you all will hear in a minute, because I think it gave context to a lot of the news that's come out, and also maybe assuaged some of my concerns that I maybe have had around the unionization process, which is going to be a long one for sure. But I'm feeling relatively optimistic about their ability to get this done, in part due to the fact that they're doing it, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, as we said, it would be a massive undertaking for them to do this without some sort of confidence that they have the votes that they need to at least get the formal vote for a union, right? So, like, I'm feeling good. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. So as we sit here to record this, it's September 4th, Sunday. Tomorrow is Labor Day. Eugene sort of alluded, he made a little hint, and maybe by the time people are even listening to this, there will be some sort of announcement. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that I think on Labor Day, they might come out and be like, we have the 30% union cards. We're filing with the NLRB.
I'm getting giddy just thinking about it.
There's something coming. We've heard, whispers from enough people that there's going to be some kind of announcement on Labor Day. So I guess we're the bums sitting here recording this podcast before we know what that announcement is. But of course, if it's big enough, we'll either do another emergency podcast or we'll just talk about it on next week's episode. Because none of this is going away, as we'll talk about with Eugene, get into the nitty gritty of the process and the next steps and what those timelines sort of look like. I don't know. The one thing that we haven't really discussed and I guess we got into a little bit with Eugene, but the one thing that we haven't discussed is Major League Baseball's deafening silence on all of this. Mm-hmm. Which, the fact that they didn't have some sanded down PR statement ready to release to the public is a little bit surprising to me. Like, I don't know if it necessarily means that they were caught off guard by this news, or if this is part of their strategy to wait and respond until the minor leaguers have demonstrated their support and filed their election. But I'm a little bit surprised that they're not getting more out ahead of this. And I guess if I'm reading it optimistically, I think that sort of means that they're a little bit on their back foot.
Yeah. And like you said, we get into this a little bit with Eugene and kind of what might be stoking MLB's tendency to keep quiet and why that might be a part of a strategy for them. But I do think we're going to play, like, neither of us are under the illusion that Major League Baseball will most likely voluntarily recognize the union. Rob Manfred is no friend to organized labor. And so maybe it's not super surprising that they're just going to kind of let this thing play out, which is not to say that I think they're not doing anything, right? I think they've likely already started organizing their campaign against unionization internally, but it doesn't really behoove them to say anything publicly right now, right? Because there's nothing that would make them look very good outside of saying, yes, we support this, which doesn't feel,
but that's
doesn't
never
feel very
stopped them
likely
before, is what's so funny. Like, that's never stopped them from going out there and shooting themselves in the foot before, especially with regards to labor issues. Like, there was nothing that was going to make them look good in the pandemic, trying to shorten the season and pay the players as little as possible. But it seemed like Rob Manfred was doing Q&As every fucking week, if you can remember that time.
No, you're right. I think that this situation is just a little more hairy for them, right? And a little more fragile because they're bound by labor laws, right? And the unknown, exactly. But you're right that it's kind of funny that all of a sudden they've wised up.
All right, well, we're gonna talk about this a ton with Eugene, so why don't we just go straight to that conversation?
Just hold your own road and raise your own babies. Smoke your own smoke and grow.
All right, Bobby, we are back now, joined by a guest who it's been a long time coming. We've been trying to make this happen for a while, and now feels like the most fitting time we could possibly make it happen. It's Eugene Freedman. He's the counsel to the president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. He is a union lawyer and a bit of a celebrity on baseball labor Twitter. Eugene, how's it going?
Good. I don't think I've ever been called a celebrity before. My brother calls me media darling.
Well, there's a few of us in this corner of baseball labor Twitter, that anytime anything happens, we're all doing our threads. We're talking about the same topics, and you're one of those people.
Absolutely.
You're one of those people for sure. And this is a podcast centered around baseball and labor. So a celebrity amongst our listeners, I'm sure. They know your work.
Thank you. We obviously have you here to talk about the recent news about minor league unionization. And we have some questions about kind of the mechanics of this and what you expect to see in the coming weeks and months. But first, I think we just wanted to get your take on did you think that this would happen either now or in the near future? Because it's obviously been a long time coming, but it never quite seemed that the conditions were ripe enough or that the political will was there on the part of the Players Association. So what was your kind of instant reaction to hearing about this news?
So a couple things to preface this. First, I think the advocates for minor leaguers have been really laying the groundwork for many years. They've been doing a great job of highlighting the atrocious working conditions as well as the significantly below market wages that minor league players receive. And I think the real I wouldn't call it icing on the cake because it's not a positive thing. Maybe the straw that broke the camel's back was when Major League Baseball lobbied Congress to include in its appropriations bill a number of years ago. It was an omnibus appropriations bill. And kind of in the last minute in the conference between the House and the Senate, they included language that basically exempted minor leagues from the Fair Labor Standards Act, which provides for minimum wage. It provides for overtime pay in excess of 40 hours in a work week, and child labor protections, which really don't apply here. But when basically Congress said, and I believe that most people in Congress did not realize this when they passed the appropriations bill, you don't have to pay these players anything. I think
that's
that
good.
really,
thank you, Congress, for not even realizing that. Much appreciated, guys.
Yes. So I think that's really when things heated up, because that took the legs out of a long ongoing lawsuit over minimum wage and overtime that the minor league players had filed as a collective action. And I don't want to get into the specifics of a collective action versus a class action, but in FLSA, it's a collective action. So I think all of that groundwork was kind of laid already, and the minor league players started to, I think, band together themselves. But I've been to a lot of AFL-CIO meetings. That's the federation that much of organized labor participates in. Not every union does, and there have been some discussions recently at the last convention in Philadelphia that happened in June. There was a AFL-CIO Sports Council that was established with the NFLPA, with the Women's Professional Soccer League players who had just joined the AFL-CIO, the national women's soccer team also recently joined the AFL-CIO. And so there has been a lot of ongoing discussions in sports about improving working conditions, particularly in those sports where there are lower wages, women's soccer being one of them, equity issues. So those things are being highlighted, not just in baseball. So I think that the time is right. I mean, you probably saw the recent survey results that said that 63%, or maybe it was 73%, I can't remember the exact figure, but of Americans support unions. And that's the highest number in at least 5 decades. So that's really kind of in the background here. And I had heard some things that were going on just in labor circles about the framework of potential organizing. And just as an example, my brother works for the Teamsters Union. He told me that several former employees of the Teamsters had started working for an organization, they couldn't say who, but who was out there laying the groundwork to collect authorization cards for minor league players. So I kind of knew that these things were going on. So I wasn't terribly surprised, but I may have been one of the very few who wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
And I really couldn't break the news because it wasn't my news to break. I'll be honest, I know some other things that are on the near term horizon that I can't share because I've been told that they are confidential, close hold. But I would expect more news in the very near future.
Wow,
Yeah.
a tease. Okay.
Some tantalizing right there by Eugene.
I mean, you tweeted right before the news broke, basically, that tomorrow's going to feel like Christmas for a lot of people, and indeed it did. You were right about that.
Yes. So yeah, that's what I was alluding to. It was another thing I couldn't, announce it. It wasn't my news to announce, but I did know about it, and I knew that the campaign was going to begin in earnest. So I did want to just put it out there that something exciting was percolating in the background.
Eugene, what do you make of the structure of this, like how it's unfolding with the minor leaguers potentially joining the Major League Baseball Players Association, whether they'll, of course, be in separate bargaining units, they'll have their own CBA and everything, but it wasn't always guaranteed that this would be the structure that it would take. Now, we had a union push for minor league hockey players a few years back. They're not part of the same union that the NHL players are a part of. The G League union in basketball was supported by the NBA Players Association, or the NBPA. I always mess that up. The National Basketball Players Association, but they're not formally in that union, I don't believe. So there's been a couple different models that they could have followed. Why do you think it did end up being authorizing the MLBPA to represent them in collective bargaining?
So I think a couple things are a factor. One is MLBPA has been very successful in negotiating with Major League management. I think also the fact that minor league baseball was brought under the One Baseball umbrella, and Major League Baseball now controls the minor leagues, from top to bottom. I think that was another key factor. So it is essentially the same employer. And then I think also this campaign is going to take a lot of money. It is a national campaign. There are a significant number of employees. The employees are spread out across the entirety of the country, which makes it very difficult to engage in direct communication. A lot of the time organizing is done, right outside the plant parking lot. And in this case, that's very difficult. But there are baseball teams in 30 cities. They all have communication networks to their minor leagues. Players get sent down on rehab assignments from the bargaining unit in the major leagues, and they've all been in the minor leagues, right? So, in
it's a really
other
important
sports, right? In other sports, you might skip the minor leagues, particularly in basketball. You may never play in a developmental league at all, but in baseball, almost everybody does. I mean, there have been a couple of players, particularly pitchers. I think Crochet was the last one to skip the minors entirely. Trying to think if there was anyone between him and John Olerud. There may not have been, but
Ohtani came over and he was technically in the minors briefly because they had signed him on a prospect deal or whatever. But
Mike Leake is the one that comes to mind for me with the Reds maybe or the Mariners. Now we're just
naming some guys.
Now we're just remembering some guys.
Yeah. So I think Olerud was the biggest one, in terms of making a splash that I remember. But be that as it may, everybody's been through the minor leagues.
Mm-hmm.
They've also been there on rehab assignments. They know the players. I think particularly it's important in this organizing drive that Major League Baseball has such strong ties, national ties between players. Venezuelan players stay together in the off season, whether they're in the minors or majors. They Cabrera and Altuve kind of mentor them all. You have the same thing with players from Puerto Rico. You have the same thing with players from the Dominican. Yeah. And I think that those ties are going to be really critical here. And, if another union, let's say the Laborers International Union, LIUNA, decided to organize the minor leagues, they would not have that same connection to the players that the Major League Baseball players do. And so I think it's really critical. I think it's really helpful. And I anticipate that because it's such a high profile campaign, they'll probably get some help. It won't just be Major League Baseball Players Association doing the organizing. I think they'll get some additional help in the organizing process.
Obviously, the season is winding down, both for the major leagues and the minor leagues. Can you talk about any potential challenges that might pose to this organization effort? I know you tweeted a little bit about how their seasonal workers status, makes it maybe slightly more difficult for MLBPA to keep their arms wrapped around everybody, right? Because they're changing teams, or they're graduating from the minor leaguers, or they're not going to see a minor league stadium for 3 or 6 months or whatever. So can you talk a little bit about what the PA might be kind of having to face as these seasons wind down?
Yeah, so there are a number of complications, both in terms of the logistical organizing, but then also in terms of the legal organizing. And I'll try to separate them. And I'll first, you named some of the logistical things, right? The teams in the minors usually end right around now and then go into the playoffs. They were pushed back for the start of their season this year, so their regular season will continue for a little bit longer, but they are wrapping up, and so that makes it complicated. From a legal perspective, it's complicated because the union has to it put out these authorization cards. They have to be signed by at least 30% of the proposed bargaining unit for submission to the NLRB as evidence of a showing of interest. Normally you want that within a pretty tight window of time. You don't want that spread out over a very long period of time, especially if some of the people some of the employees are no longer in the proposed bargaining unit by the time you submit the cards.
Yeah.
Most unions also seek to have significantly more than 50% of the cards, because there will be an anti-union campaign in almost all cases, and you will lose some support to that anti-union campaign. But in this particular case, you have employees who may not be tendered new contracts right away. They may not be necessarily employees in the off season until they get their next contract offered to them. Let's say they're in low A right now, and the team has control if it wants it until those players become eligible for the Rule 5 draft, right? So. I think it varies a little bit by age, when they qualify for that, but it's basically 5 or 6 years of minor league control, as far as I remember. But teams don't necessarily re-sign or offer a contract to every player that they had the previous year. Some people are weeded out. Some people become minor league free agents and move teams, but they might not get picked up until spring training the next year. And so, I think that unless the player is a high draft pick, they may not have their contract tendered to them until the spring. And so there'll be a question, at least, whether they're employees right now, if the union does file its petition with the NLRB in the off season. If it waits until the spring, it'll be in a much better place to say, yes, these are all employees of minor league baseball. There are also, a bunch of other questions I have, and I actually hope to get some of them answered in the next couple of weeks. But I don't know if they're going to tell me until they file their petition. But, one thing I'm concerned about is Major League Baseball potentially saying that, for example, rookie league doesn't fit within an appropriate bargaining unit. That their conditions of employment are significantly different because they play a short season, because they're all based in the same, essentially one location, very little travel involved. That it's significantly different conditions of employment, and therefore they should not be in the same bargaining unit with low A through triple A. We'll see what the Players Association petitions for, and whether Major League Baseball seeks to clarify the unit or challenge the bargaining unit definition. Many employers do challenge the bargaining unit definition just to slow down the organizing drive. And that I wouldn't put that past Major League Baseball because, Rob Manfred is not a friend of organized labor. So he very likely will say, put up all the roadblocks you can. And one of them is to say, not an appropriate unit, require a hearing, have the regional director make a decision, maybe challenge that decision to the board. I mean, there are a lot of potential hurdles along the way. Now, if the Players Association gets 75%, 80% of the cards signed, I mean, they're going to ask for voluntary recognition.
Yeah.
And, they should get it. But that doesn't mean they'll get it. I mean, more likely than not, Major League Baseball, who hasn't put out any statement at all right now, probably because they don't want to commit a UOP. But, once there is and for listeners, that's an unfair labor practice. But when they do file the petition, I expect Major League Baseball, or they may even wait until the regional director orders an election. I expect the Major League Baseball statement to go something like, we support the process, and we'll wait and see what the results of the election are before we make a comment.
Yeah.
I don't think they're actually going to weigh in publicly, even though they may weigh in privately with the players in whether they're captive audience meetings or other workplace discussions.
Now, you brought up ULPs. We live in sort of a golden era of unfair labor practices taking place in broad daylight, whether that be Starbucks or Amazon or smaller places. When this news breaks, of course, you have a lot of people saying things like, what is Major League Baseball going to do? How scorched earth are they going to go? What are they going to try to do to really beat back this union effort? And, retaliatory practices are illegal for organizing, but there are certain things that Major League Baseball could do and kind of like try to guise underneath. Well, this is just us cutting a player, or this is just us making a business decision about shutting down a team that has certain support, or promoting people out and spreading out the support across so that there's not these sort of collections of minor leaguers who are starting to band together with this union effort. Obviously, it's impossible to predict exactly what Major League Baseball will do, but do you suspect that there will be some of that stuff kind of going on behind closed doors? And if so, it becomes so unwieldy because there are so many different minor league affiliates in so many different places. To be able to file a ULP for all of these different individual cases, it seems like a 10-year long process. So I'm curious what you think about how messy this will actually get in practice.
Well, I think, there's a lot of little pieces to that question, but, I think the primary thing to focus on is the statement that the Players Association put out directly to the players that they're organizing. One is that they're going to keep the cards confidential. Mm-hmm. They're going to share them confidentially with the NLRB, and that management doesn't get to see those cards. So unless there are member organizers, and in this case, there might not be vocal member organizers. There may be external organizers and major league player organizers. If there are not, member organizers, then they're all protected, right? Their confidentiality is protected. Additionally, the Players Association said that when they seek, or if they seek voluntary recognition, they will use a third-party verifier to maintain the confidentiality. So they don't intend to show management ever until they are certified who their supporters are. So I think that's really important here. Yeah. I think additionally, like you said, there are some complications, right? But the general managers of the 30 clubs also have a bit of a say here, and so do the 30 individual owners. If Major League Baseball wants to blackball a particular player, but the team sees value in that player, they're not going to necessarily go along with Major League Baseball. So I think it would be very difficult, especially because they have such a long developmental cycle on some of these players. If somebody was, let's say, Halladay, who the number one, Zach Halladay, the number one pick.
Yeah.
If he decided to be vocal, the Orioles aren't going to do anything about that, right? They're going to, he's already moving through their system. I expect next year he may start at high A. They're not, if he's organizing his roster, they're not going to say, oh, let's cut him. They just gave him $8 million, right? They're going to want to see value in that, and they're going to see him as one of the top prospects in their organization, especially now that they brought up Gunnar Henderson today, or 2 days ago. So their teams like that are just not going to make decisions that are detrimental to their own interests. So I think there's a bit of a push and a pull there. And I think Major League Baseball doesn't have the same control because they're a multi-employer bargaining unit that they would if they had full control over all 30 team rosters.
Yeah.
And then their minor league systems.
I know there's been some concern that Major League Baseball could do what they did just a couple short years ago, which is eliminate some minor league teams as a result of this, or as a, an effort to kind of throw disarray into the whole organizing process as a way to potentially deter the support. Do you see that as a distinct possibility? I know there was some language that was negotiated over in the CBA where the Players Association said, we don't want to give you the ability to eliminate more roster spots, but are there avenues through which Major League Baseball could say, hey, we need to make this business decision X, Y, and Z. These, the Trash Pandas are now contracted. They're now an independent league team. Like, do you see that as something that's a possibility in the coming, I guess, months?
So, in the last contraction of the minor leagues, they made it so that every team has the exact same number of affiliates. Mm-hmm. Before that, some franchises had more high A affiliates or low A affiliates, or I don't think anyone had an additional triple A affiliates, but they may have had more, in that rookie ball through high A category. I think the Yankees in particular had a number of extra A ball teams compared to other teams. And so, if they were to eliminate, they would have to do it, league by league. And maybe they would consolidate low A and high A, or eliminate. There are two rookie ball leagues, so maybe they'd eliminate one of them. I don't know that would make sense to them, just because, in terms of the rookie ball leagues, because they have enough draftees that they need two leagues for them. And they did reduce the draft, but there's still enough players, including unsigned free agents or undrafted free agents, where they like to have two rookie ball leagues. But if they were to do that in the midst of an organizing drive, I think that would constitute at least the basis for filing an unfair labor practice charge. And I think it would likely lead to the general counsel, through a regional director, issuing an unfair labor practice complaint. Jennifer Abruzzo, who is the general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board now, has been very aggressive in pursuing unfair labor practices, and has asked for 10J remedies, which I don't want to go into too much detail, but it basically asks for an injunction against the employer when they're committing violations of the act that are so severe that there may be irreparable harm. Elimination of 30 teams. In this case, I think she would seek an injunction against Major League Baseball doing that.
Eugene, I'm curious, can you compare this, or could you think of any comparison to a union effort like in the wider American labor movement that this resembles? Because it's so weird, because the MLBPA is such a specific union for such a specific sector. Minor league baseball is so different than most union drives because it's happening in so many different, disparate, spread out places. It's part of the reason that it took so long to get to this point. But for the most part, like when you are making a union push, when you're trying to get people to sign these cards, when you're going to an election with the NLRB, it's one employer in one place joining onto a larger union, becoming a shop within a larger union. That's what happened with me and my colleagues at the Ringer. That's what happens in most places at most employers. But this is so different. So I'm curious, widening the scope a little bit, does this remind you of anything from either recent or past labor history that you can think of?
So I think probably one of the better analogies is, and because it's a national unit with a lot of different locations, I think the best example are the airlines. And right now, and actually for the third time in probably 15 years, the Association of Flight Attendants is organizing the Delta flight attendants. AFA has unfortunately lost two elections. One was shortly after the merger with Northwest Airlines. Northwest had been union. They were affiliated with AFA. Delta was ununionized, but they were the larger company, and so there were and the larger group of employees. So there was no argument for successorship. And so they mounted an organizing drive, and they came up just short. A few years after that, they began organizing them again, and again they fell just short. In this more positive union environment, with a positive union president, and they're under the Railway Labor Act, so it's the National Mediation Board as opposed to the National Labor Relations Board, but a favorable NMB. I think it's more likely now that they will win their election once they move forward with it. The National Mediation Board and the Railway Labor Act have slightly different rules for elections. Under the National Labor Relations Act, you vote by it's a majority of ballots cast, but under the Railway Labor Act, it's a majority of the unit.
Yeah,
so it's not just the ballots cast. If people who don't show up to vote count as a no vote. So from that perspective, it's somewhat different. But because Delta has so many bases across the country, many people are based in Atlanta, Minneapolis, Detroit, or Salt Lake City. But there are flight attendants based at almost every airport across the country. So this effort to organize is to an extent very similar, because you've got small groups of employees spread out all across the country, and you've got people who are already members of those unions also, somewhat close or affiliated with them. And, you have United flight attendants, and you have a lot of the smaller carriers that are represented by AFA, and they're at the same basis, so they're going to be organizing their brothers and sisters at Delta, and Delta is a huge company. I mean, it's one of the largest, if not the largest, airline. They are already their pilots are already represented, so it's to an extent it's similar to Major League Baseball, in that some of the employees are represented, but not this large group. It's not unprecedented. So I don't think it would be, it's not too much of a administrative task for the NLRB General Counsel's office to pull off an election.
So we want to let you go here because you've been really generous with your time, but I'm curious just what's next in your mind. Do we sit and wait for the results to come in? How are you feeling about this all? Are you feeling optimistic about their chances?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. I think, before we get to wait for the votes to come in, I mean, we're going to know when the Players Association petitions for an election. They're going to make an announcement. They're going to say, with 85% of cards signed, we went to Major League Baseball and asked for voluntary recognition. They declined. And so today we have filed a petition with the NLRB, and we're asking for an expedited election. I think, you're going to see a statement like that. That'll be the next news. And there may be interim news saying things are going well. We're getting a lot of cards signed, but it's not going to be, process news. But when they make the announcement that they've filed the petition, that'll be the next news. And then we'll have to wait for the regional director to issue an election order, and see if Major League Baseball puts any of those legal hurdles in the way.
I'm optimistic just because this is such a huge step for the MLBPA in terms of like reaching down to its most, battered down workers, like in a way that they haven't been able to do in like the last couple decades. I think one of the criticisms that gets levied against union like MLBPA is how involved are you in the wider American labor movement? And just this process at all, organizing the minor leaguers who are being left out, politically and in their workplace intentionally and being paid below minimum wage is I think it's a really cool move. So I'm pretty excited about all this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just from that talking point, and I know it's not true, but the talking point in the management-centered media, millionaires versus billionaires, when someone's making $4,000 a year to play rookie ball,
It'd take a few years
They're
to get
not
to a million.
It takes a really long time to get there. I mean, even if you're making $30,000 for 6 months playing in AAA, you're not a millionaire. You're not even making, average wages, where you're barely making poverty wages if you have a family of 4. So, most of these players are below the poverty line. And it's important to remember that. And it's important to remember that, everybody deserves rights in the workplace. And this is a big step to gaining them.
Eugene Freedman, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to just tell people where they can find your tweets, find your writing, any work that you're doing?
Sure. So my Twitter handle is at Eugene Freedman. It's Freedman. So there's 2 E's as opposed to the alternate spelling of Freedman. Most of my other writing is for my union, NACA. So you probably don't see that often, but periodically I will pop up on Baseball Prospectus or Fangraphs. And I've got a number of things published at both sites over the years. So you can take a look at it. It's probably not timely, but can help you kind of dive into some labor history in baseball.
Eugene, thanks so much.
I hate my boss, dude think he know it all, and I know it all, but I follow protocol.
Okay, thank you to Eugene. Thank you again to Allison McCague. Thank you to the 5 members of our Alex Rodriguez VIP Club tier that we shout out at the end of every episode. There's so many of you. We shout out 5 of you at the end of every episode as a token of our appreciation. Those 5 members are Connor, Jacob, Becca, JT, and Kieran. Alex, we still have plenty of merch available for people. You could argue an unlimited amount of merch available for people. Over at our website, tippingpitches.myshopify.com. If you don't want to type all of that stuff out, it's just tiny.cc/nationalize. You were not with me at the New York Mets game yesterday, thankfully, for your own Saturday night.
Okay.
For your own sake. Although we had great seats, it was a fun time to be at the ballpark until about the 9th inning. Well, until about the 5th inning when Max Scherzer came out with no explanation.
That's when the dark clouds gathered.
It's not when you want to be at the game, when you have no context for why the pitcher who always goes 7 is out after 5 and 67 pitches.
Yeah, his shortest start of the year.
Fingers crossed for Max's left side fatigue. But you were not with me at the
same. That's so same.
I'm always saying
Max.
this. Yeah, I'm always saying this.
My left side, my right side, my top side.
You were not with me at this game when a gentleman was wearing a Unionize the Miners Mets colors on the Jumbotron. A gigantic shout out to Wallflower Power on Twitter, who responded and said, "Glad y'all liked that. What a time to be alive. Being at a Mets game, seeing our shirts on the Jumbotron. A real silver lining moment there. You could be like that person if you go to our website and buy your own Tipping Pitches merch. Everybody's doing it. All the cool kids are doing it.
We also have a Patreon. Some of you may be aware of this, but that's a great way to get more content from us, more occasionally delinquent newsletters from us.
Yes. So sorry. We just dropped the ball. We just missed a newsletter cycle, and to make up for it, we're sending 2 straight.
Yeah, but we hope you guys have been enjoying the ones as of late. Again, you can get access to that at the top tier of our Patreon, our Alex Rodriguez tier, which comes along with Q&As, obviously access to the Slack, other fun opportunities. But there are 3 tiers for you if you don't want to sign up at that highest level. Go check it out. Patreon.com/tippingpitches.
What'd you think of the newsletter? You like my idea?
I loved it. I've never watched Industry, but I'm yes, absolutely. I was already thinking of the ways that we could get Aaron Sorkin signed on to do a
hold on, slow down.
Okay, Adam McCague?
That would be fun. I could stomach Adam McCague despite his annoying online tendencies. We can all just kind of ignore that and allow him to EP. Mm-hmm. Adam McCague did EP Succession as well, which I know is one of your favorite shows. We've never lived in the same city when Succession put a new season out. Have you thought about the possibility of us watching Succession on Sunday nights together?
A live watch? Oh my God.
Live watch. Hold on, slow your roll. We haven't added a fourth a fourth tier of our Patreon.
Oh, well, I meant live for you and I.
Live together.
We can do a watch along.
That just occurred to me for the first time. But anyway, the people who don't have the newsletter don't know what we're talking about. And that's why they should sign up for Tipping Pitches. That's why they should sign up for patreon.com/tipping pitches. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll be back next week.
I put on my pants, put on my shoes. I pray to God, paid on my dues. I'm trying to win, seemed like I was born to lose.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping Pitches.
Tipping Pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping Pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!